At that instant, the stove exploded with such a force it blew the door off. "Great balls of fire!" Jackson yelled. He came up from his chair as if the seat of his pants had blown up. "Look out, Daddy!" Amabel screamed and hugged Jackson so hard she threw him flat on his back. "Hold it, in the name of the law!" a new voice shouted. A tall, slim, colored man with a cop's scowl rushed into the kitchen. He had a pistol in his right hand and a gold-plated badge in his left. "I'm a United States Marshal. I'm shooting the first one who moves." He looked as if he meant it. The kitchen had filled with smoke and stunk like black gunpowder. Gas was pouring from the stove. The scorched cardboard tubes that had been cooking in the oven were scattered over the floor. "It's the law!" Amabel screamed. "I heard him," Jackson yelled. "Let's beat it," Jody shouted. He tripped the marshal into the table and made for the door. Hank got there before him, and Jody went out on Hank's back. The marshal sprawled across the tabletop. "Run, Daddy," Amabel said. "Don't wait for me," Jackson replied. He was on his hands and knees, trying as hard as he could to get to his feet, but Amabel was running so hard she stumbled over him and knocked him down again as she made for the door. Before the marshal could straighten up, all three of them had escaped. "Don't you move," he shouted at Jackson. "I ain't moving, Marshal." When the marshal finally got his feet underneath him, he yanked Jackson erect and snapped a pair of handcuffs about his wrist. "Trying to make a fool out of me. You'll get 10 years for this." Jackson turned a battleship gray. "I ain't done nothing, Marshal, I swear to God." Jackson had attended a Negro college in the South, but whenever he was excited or scared, he began talking in his native dialect. "Sit down and shut up," the marshal ordered. He shut off the gas and began picking up the cardboard tubes for evidence. He opened one, took out a brand-new $100 bill, and held it up toward the light. Raised from a 10, the markings are still on it. Jackson had started to sit down, but he stopped suddenly and began to plead. "It wasn't me what done that, Marshal. I swear to God, it was them two fellas who got away. All I done was come into the kitchen to get a drink of water." "Don't lie to me, Jackson. I know you. I got the goods on you, man. I've been watching you three counterfeiters for days." Tears welled up in Jackson's eyes. He was so scared. "Listen, Marshal, I swear to God, I didn't have nothing to do with that. I don't even know how to do it. The little man called Hank who got away is the counterfeiter. He the only one who got the paper." "Don't worry about them, Jackson. I'll get them too. But I already got you, and I'm taking you down to the federal building. So I'm warning you, anything you say to me will be used against you in court." Jackson slid from the chair and got down on his knees. "Leave me go just this once, Marshal." The tears began streaming down his face. "Just this once, Marshal. I never been arrested before. I'm a church man. I ain't dishonest. I confess I put up the money for Hank to raise, but it was him who was breaking the law, not me. I ain't done nothing would nobody do if they had a chance to make a pile of money." "Get up, Jackson, and take your punishment like a man," the marshal said. "You're just as guilty as the others. If you hadn't put up the 10s, Hank couldn't have changed them into 100s. Jackson saw himself serving 10 years in prison. 10 years away from Amabel. Jackson had only had Amabel for 11 months, but he couldn't live without her. He was going to marry her as soon as she got a divorce from that man down south she was still married to. If he went to prison for 10 years, by then she'd have another man and would have forgotten all about him. He'd come out of prison an old man, 38 years old, dried up. No one would give him a job. No woman would want him. He'd be a bum, hungry, skinny, begging on the streets of Harlem, sleeping in doorways, drinking canned heat to keep warm. Mama Jackson hadn't raised a son for that, struggled to send him through the college for Negroes just to have him become a convict. He just couldn't let the marshal take him in.